My name is Claire Bennett, 34 years old, and I used to believe that love meant compromise. That if you just bent a little more, adjusted a little further, made yourself smaller and quieter, eventually you'd fit perfectly into someone else's life. I learned the hard way that some people don't want a partner. They want an accessory that doesn't make noise. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. It started with a text message at 2 in the morning. I woke up to use the bathroom, checked my phone out of habit, and there it was, glowing in the darkness. You snore too loud. Sleep in the guest room from now on. No conversation. No gentle suggestion over breakfast. Just a command, delivered while I was asleep, as if he couldn't even be bothered to tell me to my face. I sat on the edge of our bed, staring at those words until they blurred. My husband of 6 years, Josh Bennett, couldn't walk 10 feet down the hall to wake me up and talk about it. He'd rather send a text and roll over. I didn't respond that night. I just sat there in the dark, listening to him breathe deeply, peacefully, completely unbothered. The man who'd promised to love me in sickness and in health had just exiled me from our bedroom because my body made sounds while I slept. Sounds I couldn't control. Sounds that were apparently more inconvenient to him than our marriage vows. The next morning, he acted like nothing happened. He poured his coffee, scrolled through his phone, kissed my forehead on his way out the door to his job at the marketing firm downtown here in Seattle. "Have a good day, babe," he said, like he hadn't just rewritten the terms of our relationship via text message. I stood at the kitchen counter, still in my pajamas, and whispered to the empty room, "What just happened?" That evening, I tried to bring it up. I waited until he was settled on the couch, remote in hand, his usual spot after work. "Josh, about your text last night." He didn't look up from the television. "What about it?" His tone was casual, like we were discussing what to have for dinner. "You want me to sleep in the guest room because I snore?" He shrugged. "It's not personal, Claire. I just need my rest. You know how stressful work's been. I can't function on broken sleep." "Not personal." As if banishing your wife from the bedroom could ever be anything but personal. I sat down across from him, trying to keep my voice steady. "Have you considered that maybe I should see a doctor? That there might be a reason I'm snoring?" He finally looked at me, and his expression was so detached it made my chest ache. "Or you could just sleep in the other room. It's got a perfectly good bed." Problem solved. Problem solved. For him, maybe. For me, it felt like I was being erased one text message at a time. But I didn't argue. Not then. Something in his eyes told me that arguing would be pointless. He'd already made his decision, and my feelings about it were just noise he didn't want to hear. So I nodded. I picked up my pillow that night and walked down the hallway to the guest room, a space we'd decorated for visitors who never came. The bed was cold. The sheets smelled like storage. And as I lay there in the darkness, I realized something that would change everything. This wasn't about snoring. This was about control. About him deciding what was convenient and expecting me to comply without question. That night, instead of crying myself to sleep, I started making mental notes. Because if Josh thought he could quietly push me out of his life one room at a time, he was about to learn that quiet women can be the most dangerous ones of all. I started paying attention to things I'd overlooked for years. The way Josh would glance at his phone and smirk at messages he never shared. How he'd started going to the gym at odd hours, coming home smelling like expensive cologne I'd never bought him. The business trips that seemed to multiply, each one requiring him to stay an extra night because of meetings that ran late. I wasn't suspicious at first. I was just awake now, really awake, in a way I hadn't been for our entire marriage. The guest room became my observation post. Funny how being pushed aside gives you perspective. From that smaller bed in that quieter room, I could hear everything. His late-night phone calls in the kitchen, voice low and careful. The sound of the garage door opening at midnight when he said he'd be home by 9. The shower running at 1 in the morning. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now, back to the story. I didn't confront him. I did something smarter. I started documenting. My job as a senior project manager at a construction firm had taught me the value of detailed records. Every timeline mattered. Every receipt told a story. Every inconsistency was a red flag that could cost millions if ignored. I applied the same principles to my marriage. I created a folder on my laptop, password protected, titled simply, Home Renovation Ideas. Inside it, I began building a different kind of blueprint. First, I checked our phone records. We'd always had a shared plan, one of those married couple conveniences that seemed smart at the time. I logged into the account and downloaded 6 months of call logs. There was a number that appeared constantly. Late nights, early mornings, weekends when he said he was at the office. Sometimes they'd talk for an hour. I didn't recognize the number, but I saved every instance, highlighting them in yellow on my spreadsheet. Then I looked at our credit card statements. Josh had always handled our finances, said it was easier if one person managed the bills. I'd trusted him because that's what you do when you love someone, right? You trust them with the passwords and the bank accounts and the boring administrative parts of life. But now I looked closer. Charges at restaurants I'd never been to. Hotel rooms in Seattle when he claimed to be in Portland for work. Jewelry purchases from a boutique downtown, gifts I'd never received. Each transaction went into my folder with dates and amounts highlighted. I also started checking his location. We'd set up one of those family tracking apps years ago, back when we actually functioned like a family. He'd forgotten it was still active on his phone. So while he thought he was at the office working late, I could see he was parked outside an apartment complex in Fremont. While he said he was at a client dinner, his phone pinged from a hotel bar in Belltown. I took screenshots of everything, each one timestamped and saved. My coworker Amanda noticed I'd been distracted. We were reviewing blueprints for a commercial project in Redmond, and I'd missed an obvious structural issue. "Claire, you okay? You seem somewhere else lately." I looked up from the plans, realizing I'd been staring at the same page for 10 minutes. "Just tired. Not sleeping well." She studied me with the kind of look that said she knew there was more to it. "If you ever need to talk, I'm here. Sometimes the buildings aren't the only things that need inspection." That night, Josh came home at 11. I heard him moving around the kitchen, opening the fridge, pouring something to drink. Then his footsteps stopped outside the guest room door. For a moment, I thought he might knock, might ask if I was okay, might remember that I was his wife and not just an inconvenience he'd stored away. But the footsteps moved on. He went to our bedroom, the one that used to be ours, and closed the door. The lock clicked. He'd started locking the bedroom door. That's when I knew for certain. This wasn't about snoring. This was about someone else. I lay in the dark, my laptop glowing beside me, and I added one more note to my folder. Day 42 in guest room. Bedroom door now locked. Subject attempting to establish permanent separation. I sounded clinical, detached, like I was documenting a construction defect rather than the collapse of my marriage. But detachment was survival. Emotion was expensive, and I needed to save every ounce of energy for what was coming. Because I'd decided something important that night. If Josh wanted to push me out, he was going to have to face what he'd done. Not quietly. Not through text messages and locked doors. He was going to have to stand in front of everyone who mattered and explain exactly why his wife wasn't good enough to sleep in her own bed. And I was going to make sure he had an audience when he tried. The opportunity came exactly 3 weeks later. Josh announced it over breakfast, the first meal we'd shared in days. He was scrolling through his phone, barely looking at me, when he said, "My parents want to do their anniversary dinner at that place on the waterfront. The fancy one. They're inviting the whole family." He said it like it was just another calendar event, but I knew better. His parents, Robert and Linda Bennett, loved a performance. Their 40th anniversary wasn't going to be some quiet celebration. It would be elaborate, public, and filled with everyone they wanted to impress. When? I asked, keeping my voice neutral. 3 weeks from Saturday. Mom specifically requested you handle the planning. He finally looked up, and there was something almost amused in his expression. She said you have great taste. Make sure it's impressive, okay? My brother's bringing his new girlfriend, and you know how Mom gets about first impressions. Of course. I was good enough to plan their events, just not good enough to sleep in my own bedroom. I smiled politely. I'll make it memorable. He went back to his phone, missing the weight behind those words entirely. Over the next 3 weeks, I became 2 different people. To Josh and his family, I was the dutiful daughter-in-law, coordinating with the restaurant, selecting the menu, arranging flowers, and confirming the guest list. Linda called me almost daily with new requests. Claire, darling, make sure the wine is that specific vintage Robert loves. And can we get those little chocolate truffles as favors? You're so good at these details. Details. That word again. I was good at details, which is exactly why Josh should have been more careful. While I planned his parents' perfect evening, I was also planning something else entirely. I'd finally identified the phone number that appeared so frequently in our records. It belonged to someone named Sienna Marshall. A little searching on social media told me everything I needed to know. 28 years old, worked at the same marketing firm as Josh, recently posted photos from the same Portland hotel Josh had charged to our credit card during his last business trip. She wasn't even trying to hide it. Or maybe Josh had convinced her there was nothing to hide. I printed everything. Call logs, credit card statements, hotel receipts, the social media photos with timestamps that matched his alleged work trips. I organized it all into manila envelopes, one for each member of his immediate family. His parents, his brother Kyle, his sister Morgan. Each envelope labeled simply with their name, the contents inside telling a story Josh thought he'd kept hidden. But I didn't stop there. I also went to a doctor, something Josh had dismissed when I'd suggested it weeks ago. Turns out I didn't have a snoring problem. I had mild seasonal allergies that could be managed with a simple medication. The doctor gave me a clean bill of health and seemed confused when I asked for the report in writing. Is someone questioning your health, Mrs. Bennett? She asked gently. Just keeping records, I said. I added the medical report to my collection. Proof that the excuse Josh had used to exile me was based on nothing but his own convenience. The night before the anniversary dinner, I couldn't sleep. Not because of anxiety, but because of clarity. Everything was ready. The restaurant had confirmed the private dining room. The flowers would be delivered at 5. The menu was set. And in my car, locked in the trunk, were 5 envelopes that would dismantle Josh's carefully constructed image. He came home late that night, as usual. I heard him in the kitchen, then his footsteps paused outside the guest room again. This time, he knocked softly. Claire? You awake? I didn't answer. After a moment, he spoke through the door. Tomorrow's a big deal for my parents. I just want to make sure everything's perfect. You've got it all handled, right? Everything's perfect, I said to the darkness. Good. Thanks for doing this. I know planning isn't your favorite thing. He waited, maybe expecting me to say more, but I stayed quiet. Finally, his footsteps retreated. The bedroom door closed. The lock clicked. I lay there, staring at the ceiling, and allowed myself a small smile. Josh was right about one thing. I didn't love planning parties. But I absolutely loved planning revelations. And tomorrow, in front of everyone who mattered to him, Josh was going to learn the difference between being good at details and being good at the truth. The truth didn't need decorations or vintage wine. It just needed the right moment and the right audience. And I'd arranged both perfectly. The restaurant glowed with soft candlelight and the gentle murmur of celebration. I'd arrived early to ensure every detail was flawless. White roses on each table, the good champagne chilling, place cards arranged precisely where I wanted them. Linda swept in wearing an emerald dress that probably cost more than my monthly salary, Robert trailing behind in his tailored suit. They looked like people who'd spent 40 years perfecting the art of looking perfect. "Claire, this is stunning," Linda gushed, kissing both my cheeks. "You've outdone yourself." "Only the best for you both," I said warmly. Josh arrived with his brother Kyle and sister Morgan. He looked handsome in his navy suit, confident and relaxed. He kissed my cheek absently, the kind of gesture performed for appearances. "Looks great, babe. You nailed it." Then he moved to greet his parents, leaving me standing alone near the entrance. That's when I saw her. Sienna Marshall walked in wearing a black cocktail dress, her hand intertwined with Kyle's. My breath caught. Josh's brother was dating Josh's mistress. The audacity was almost impressive. Morgan noticed my expression. "That's Kyle's new girlfriend, Sienna. She works with Josh, actually." Small world, right? She said it innocently, having no idea just how small that world was about to become. Dinner began with toasts and laughter. Robert stood, raising his glass. 40 years with this incredible woman. The secret to marriage is simple. Respect, honesty, and never going to bed angry. Everyone clinked glasses. Josh smiled at me across the table, and I smiled back. Sienna sat 3 seats down, occasionally glancing at Josh with a look that anyone paying attention would recognize. But nobody was paying attention. Not yet. After the main course, Linda stood for her turn to speak. "I want to thank our beautiful family for being here. And especially Claire, who made tonight possible." She gestured toward me. "You've always been such a thoughtful addition to our family. Josh is lucky to have you." Lucky. That word kept following me. I stood slowly, smoothing my dress. "Actually, Linda, since we're celebrating honesty and respect tonight, I have something I'd like to share with everyone." The table quieted. Josh's expression shifted slightly, a flicker of confusion crossing his face. I reached into my bag and pulled out the envelopes, walking around the table to hand one to Linda, one to Robert, one to Morgan, and one to Kyle. I saved the last one for Josh, placing it directly in front of him. These are anniversary gifts of a different kind. The gift of truth. Linda opened hers first, her perfectly made-up face going pale as she scanned the papers inside. Robert leaned over, reading alongside her. Morgan gasped softly. Kyle's hands trembled as he pulled out hotel receipts with his girlfriend's name alongside his brother's. "What is this?" Linda whispered. I remained standing, my voice steady. "Those are 6 months of phone records, credit card statements, and hotel receipts showing that Josh has been having an affair with Sienna Marshall, who, as fate would have it, is currently dating his brother." The silence was deafening. Sienna's face drained of all color. Kyle turned to stare at his brother, then at his girlfriend, his mouth opening and closing without sound. Josh stood abruptly, his chair scraping loudly against the floor. "Claire, what are you doing?" "I'm sleeping in the guest room, Josh. Remember? You texted me that I snore too loud. Funny thing, though. I pulled out the medical report, holding it up for everyone to see. I went to a doctor. Turns out I don't have a snoring problem. Just seasonal allergies. Easily managed. But you never cared enough to suggest I get checked, did you? You just wanted me out of the way." Linda's voice cracked through the silence. "How could you do this to her? To this family?" Josh tried to speak, but Robert held up his hand. "I don't want to hear excuses. Not tonight. Not ever." Kyle stood, throwing his napkin on the table. "We're done, Sienna. And you," he pointed at Josh, "you're dead to me." He walked out without looking back. Morgan gathered her things quietly, pausing only to squeeze my shoulder. "I'm sorry we didn't see it. I'm sorry you had to be the one to show us." One by one, they left. His parents, his sister, the few family friends who'd witnessed everything. The private dining room emptied until it was just Josh and me, surrounded by the ruins of his carefully built image. "You planned this," he said finally, his voice hollow. "You wanted to destroy me." "No, Josh. You destroyed yourself. I just stopped protecting you from the consequences." I picked up my purse, ready to leave. The guest room was never about snoring, was it? He looked away, unable to meet my eyes. I needed space. Things with Sienna just happened. Things don't just happen. You made choices. You sent that text because it was easier than being honest. Easier than admitting you wanted someone else. You thought I'd just accept it quietly, disappear into that room and stop being inconvenient. I moved toward the door, then paused. I filed for divorce yesterday. The papers are being served Monday. The house is in my name, by the way. My parents helped with the down payment, remember? You have 30 days. 3 months later, I was back in our bedroom. My bedroom now. I'd redecorated, painted the walls a soft gray, bought new sheets that smelled like fresh starts. The guest room became my home office, a space for building things instead of hiding from them. Josh moved in with a friend, his reputation at work quietly shredded after HR investigated the affair. Sienna transferred to a different company. Kyle started dating someone genuine. I never heard from Josh again after the papers were signed. But Linda called once, her voice thick with emotion. "Thank you for not letting us live in his lie anymore." Some nights I still think about that text message, the one that started everything. How something so small revealed something so massive. I'd spent 6 years making myself smaller, quieter, trying to fit into someone else's idea of convenient. Now I sleep soundly in the center of my own bed, and the only person who gets to decide if I belong there is me. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.